Hey everyone, Mark Meckel here, president of Convention States, and this, of course, is the Sunday Night BattleCry. I'm so glad you're here with me. I'm so glad to be here with you. It means I'm home, and I love being home. It's been interesting. I've been home for a few weeks now. Some of you might know we have a new granddaughter around. She's 3 months old, and I've been trying to be home and enjoy that, spend time with the family. It's been fantastic. For those of you that are grandparents, you know what I'm talking about. For those of you who aren't, I hope someday you will be, because it's an incredible joy and a blessing from God, and we are loving it. So I'm home. I'm here with you. And my call to action for this week is boring and repetitive, because I've said it to you before, but I can't say it enough. I'm going to be saying it through next Tuesday. Get out and vote. And when you go vote, vote your values. If you have a chance to vote early still, vote early. Maybe not anymore. Maybe it's too late, probably in your state. I already voted. I hope you voted early. If you didn't vote early, make sure you get to vote on voting day. And when you go vote, make sure you bring other people with you. I don't mean just any people, not like people you pick up off the street, but I mean, make sure your spouse votes, make sure your kids vote if they're eligible to vote, as long as they're going to vote the way you vote. If not, you might want to distract them with the Xbox or something. But you should get out and vote, and make sure everybody you know that shares your values votes, because you should always vote according to your values. This is super important. We've talked about this a whole bunch. Vote your values. What does that mean? It means think about the things that are important to you, the things you value most. So in my case, faith, family, country. I'm worried about the economy. I worry about international relations for the country. I worry about freedom of speech, freedom of religion. I'm going to vote for the candidate. I did vote for the candidates that most support my values on those things. And you should do that. I want you to remember, it's not a personality contest. It's not about who's the best looking. It's not about who's the most charming. It's not about who's the most articulate. It's not about who's the least offensive. It's about the values. See, if you vote your values, out of your values, you're going to get the policies that you like. And out of the policies that you like, you're going to get a country, hopefully, and a state and a local community that reflects your values. If you get out and vote your values, and you do it wherever you're at, the country is going to be a better place. You know, I hear excuses from people for not voting sometimes. Remember, I come from California originally. I live in Texas now, and California people would say, who thought like me, I'm not going to vote. It's a waste of time. My vote doesn't even count because California is so liberal. Go vote. It matters. It does matter. The totals matter, even if your party doesn't win the election. If people see a change of opinion, a surge in your kind of voting, the system starts to move your way. Politicians start to pay attention to that. And so it's really important, wherever you live, in the most liberal place and you're conservative, in the most conservative place and you're liberal, I don't care who you are, go vote your values. Voting, by the way, I want to be really clear. I don't think voting is a civic virtue. Some people paint it as some sort of right that you need to do. I'm right as an RITE, like the right of voting. I don't believe in that. I think you should vote if you're informed. You should vote if you have an informed opinion. If you don't, if you're just guessing, then don't vote. I mean, you need at least a modicum of information. You need to understand which party represents your values, and then you vote your values. I'm not saying you have to know everything about every candidate or every issue. I understand why people vote party line. At least understand why you are voting party line. Why does that party represent your values? Why would you vote for them rather than the other party? What's the contrast on the issues? And then go vote your values. So be informed and go vote, and bring other people to vote with you. Make sure you get that done, obviously, by election day. Super important. This week is going to determine the future of our country. It's going to be up to you to get out there and vote. All right. This week was, I don't even know how to describe it. It was a media extravaganza. And it changed everything. And when I say changed everything, I mean everything in media is going to be different from here on out in politics. What do I mean by that? How did everything change overnight? And it did all change overnight. It all changed overnight when Donald Trump showed up to Joe Rogan's studio here in Austin. This is an incredible event. A former president goes on the biggest podcast in the world and sits with Joe Rogan and does an interview. That in and of itself is completely extraordinary. Just that actually happened tied up traffic here in Austin. It was a mess. What's so extraordinary is he sat down for 3 full hours, 3 hours nonstop. The two guys just talking. Now, I don't listen to a lot of 3 hour podcasts, and I do listen to Joe Rogan from time to time, but usually only portions of his podcast because, to be honest with you, I don't have 3 hours on a daily basis to sit around and listen to podcasts. I just don't have that kind of time. This one I took the time to listen to. And I listened to it actually in 3 separate segments because I didn't have 3 hours in a row to do it. We actually watched it, Patty and I, and the kids watched part of it, and we broke it into 3 sections. Unbelievable. I mean, what you saw was Joe Rogan, who is an extraordinarily good interviewer. Why do I say he's an extraordinarily good interviewer? Because he's just curious. It doesn't actually look like he's got a bunch of notes and he's trying to drive it in a certain way. He's just engaging in conversation, in a 3 hour conversation. And it was absolutely fascinating and incredible. Trump was funny, self-deprecating, really elucidating on policy, and talked about a lot of the things that he believed and where it comes from and why he believes those things, talked about what he would do, talked about some of the mistakes he had made. I found it to be absolutely extraordinary. Why did it change everything in the media? Because the media itself, and by that I mean the legacy media, the corporate media, the CBS, ABC, NBC, MSNBC, NPR, leftist media, generally has control of the narrative, the majority of the narrative in the country. That's been breaking because of X and other conservative media, because of Daily Wire. But this not only broke it, it blew it up because Joe Rogan sat down for 3 hours with Donald Trump. And man, if you haven't watched it, it's just great interview, great television. If you watch the video, great theater, great conversation. And the thing that I got most out of it is, a few things. One, Donald Trump's really smart. I mean, you get the humor, you get the sound bites, but listening to him have conversation, listening to him talk about nuclear power, listening to him talk about wind power, listening to him talk about foreign policy, listening to him talk about economic policy. Whether you agree or disagree with Donald Trump, he's a very smart guy. And it comes through in the interview. Number two, I thought one of the most interesting things in the interview was how much Donald Trump is self-deprecating. I mean, he's a funny guy, and a lot of his humor is self-deprecating. And, he's this colossal ego everybody talks about. He's a narcissist, but pretty funny, all the self-deprecating stuff. Joe Rogan told him, "You're a great comedian. You have great comedic timing." You could tell Trump loved that, and he does. And it comes through in this interview. There was an interesting period which covered a subject I'm not all that personally interested in. I don't know very much about, and that is mixed martial arts and just all the fights going on, all the different fighters. Really interesting to me to hear these two guys who are big fans of MMA talking about it like two guys talking about mixed martial arts. And just hearing what a regular guy he was. Joe Rogan, I think, comes across always as a regular guy. So I thought that was absolutely fascinating and fantastic. And they've now gone around the media. Like they've proven you can meet. I think he's now over 40 million views on this. They've proven that you can speak to the American public for hours on end. You don't need NBC, ABC, or CBS. And mostly the networks have been silent about that interview. Why were they silent? Because there's not much they could say about it without elevating it. And it was fantastic. Now, I think you could tell, which Rogan hasn't said and didn't indicate in advance, that he's biased. I think you could tell that he actually likes Trump. He's said before stuff that's not that kind about Trump, but it was pretty clear they were aligned on most stuff. And so I'm not saying Joe Rogan's a Trump supporter, but having Trump on, he did a huge service to Donald Trump and, in my opinion, to the country. To get a presidential candidate to sit down for 3 hours, that is absolutely incredible. Okay, so if you haven't seen it, go see it. You can see it on Spotify or anywhere else that I think you can watch it on YouTube. I don't know where else you can watch it. I watched it on Spotify. I think that's incredible. Donald Trump did this interview, took time out of a campaign schedule to do it. I think it's a brilliant political move. Kamala didn't. And that contrast is absolutely stunning as well. She had the opportunity. Rogan gave the same invitation. Come on in, sit down in my studio in Austin, 3 hours. Kamala and her people did what Kamala does, which is she threw all kinds of conditions on it. She wouldn't come to Austin to Rogan's studio, which is the only place he ever does interviews. She wouldn't do 3 hours. She would only do an hour, which is like the warm up act on Rogan's show. You do an hour of just chitty chatting, sort of warm up. In my opinion, you're just getting started. And so she declined. I think that's a huge mistake, but I also think it's done. It was done because I don't think she could handle 3 hours. And not that Rogan would be mean to her or impolite. He just never is that way with his guests. But he would definitely push her, and he would definitely want to understand her policies, and he would look genuinely for explanations. And I don't think Kamala Harris is capable of doing that. And so she declined. Again, I think that is such a huge mistake for her, a huge mistake politically from a media perspective. Again, Joe Rogan proving he can go around all the rest of the media. Trump went around all the rest of the media. So Trump does it. Kamala doesn't do it. And then JD Vance does it. Now, I was looking forward to JD Vance's interview at least as much, maybe more than I was looking forward to Donald Trump's. Why? Because, man, the guy is smart and he's articulate and he's fun and he's interesting and he's open and he just seems like a regular guy. I mean, I said Trump and Rogan seem like regular guys talking, a regular billionaire talking and a regular famous podcaster talking, but JD Vance is, man, I think he's the full package. And with full disclosure, he was not my first vice presidential candidate pick. My son-in-law poked at me and said, he's the right guy. He's the right guy. I was like, I don't know. I don't know him that well. Man, he is impressive. If you watch this interview, what you're going to see is a bunch of stuff. One, you're going to see a guy who really is just a regular guy, a guy that you absolutely would just want to sit down, have a beer with, just hang out with, tell jokes with. Some of them would be off color. I could tell you could see from this interview. I thought it was really interesting. There's some swearing that goes on in there. It's not horrible or foul, but there's some swearing that goes on. And he's clearly not uncomfortable with that. He explains that his grandma who raised him had a foul mouth and he struggles with that a little bit. They told some funny stories back and forth about their kids overhearing them swear and then swearing themselves inappropriately. It was very funny and it was very down to earth and it was very regular guys having a conversation. And then he got into it with Vance on all kinds of different policy issues, international relations policy, war policy, environmental policy, all the transgender stuff. And I haven't even finished quite listening to the whole thing, but I just got to tell you, I love JD Vance. I think that interview is the beginning of a bromance between these two guys. JD Vance is smart and savvy and down to earth. And I look at JD Vance and I say, that's the future of the Republican Party. I mean, he's young, he's 40 years old. And what you see when you see him is the possibility for the future. And there's a lot of possibility for the future in the Republican Party if you look around. Obviously, you've got Ron DeSantis, relatively young guy with a young family. Got JD Vance, young guy with a young family. Vivek Ramaswamy, young guy with a young family. There's a whole bunch of people. Sarah Huckabee Sanders, governor of Arkansas with a young family. These are all young, up and coming, conservative, new generation superstars. And they are all smart and competent. I'm sure I missed a whole bunch of them. Elise Stefanik from New York, young, up and coming superstars. The bench on the Republican side of very smart, very articulate, very media savvy people is extensive. And I'm sure that I missed a whole bunch of them right there. I mean, I just named a few off the top of my head, but I think that's what you saw when you saw JD Vance. I think you see one of, if not the future leader of the conservative movement and the Republican Party. And I loved it. So if you haven't watched these interviews, man, I know it takes a lot of time, but it's not a waste of your time. I would highly recommend it. Do it while you're out on a walk, while you're gardening, whatever. Put on your headset and listen to it. So the election's coming up. A lot of people are concerned, and I understand it, about election security. And I think that's totally reasonable to be worried about election security. I'm worried about it. We see some stories coming out of Pennsylvania that look really bad. There is some really ugly stuff going on, maybe voter suppression, Bucks County. I don't know. Hard to say exactly what's going on. We've seen ballot drop boxes burned. I have a question about ballot drop boxes. Are elections better since we put those things in place? or mail-in voting. Does anybody feel more secure about voting? Anybody feel more secure about the elections? Like our elections are more clean and fair because we have early voting and mail-in voting and drop boxes? No. Nobody feels more secure. Nobody thinks our elections are more secure now. So why do we have them? And the answer is we have them because I think it creates more room for cheating for those that want to cheat. That's why they have them. That's why they fight for them. That's why they hold them. That's, in my opinion, why that kind of stuff is primarily in blue states. They want to be able to cheat. And we're definitely not more secure. And I'm an advocate. We go back to single day. It's supposed to be election day, according to the Constitution. Paper ballots, no drop boxes, no early voting. I'd be not opposed to 2 days, make it a national holiday, give people a day off, and then do one weekend day. Maybe it's Friday, Saturday voting or something and that's it. And I believe in ID and registration. Like, you should have to want to vote. Like I said, it's not a civic virtue just to vote. Informed voting by people who really want to vote, by people who are willing to go out of their way to vote. That's the kind of voter that we want in the United States of America. So I am worried about election security, but, and here's the good, it's way better this cycle than it's been in the last couple of cycles. Those who care about election security have been paying attention. They've learned their lessons. I've heard from inside the RNC. I know people who are volunteering for the RNC as lawyers, and they say it's run so much better this time than it has been in previous cycles. The RNC seems to have their processes, their procedures, their reporting, their personnel in place in a way that we have way better view of the elections all over the country than we've had in the past. And that's really important. So I want to tell you, well, I don't say there can't be any cheating. I don't believe we should have these electronic machines at all. I do think it's better this cycle than it was 2016 or 2020 or 2022. I think we're going to see a more clean election. Now, there's two possible scenarios for election night and the next day, which is either we have a blowout and we know for sure the election results by the evening of the 5th or morning of the 6th. I don't expect that based on the polling right now, unless all the polling's wrong. It seems like it's super close. Seems like it might drag out for a few days. I would say the most important thing you can do during that period, just stay calm. Just relax. Just let it unfold. Whatever happens is going to happen. You don't have any control over it. I don't have any control over it. So no need to get worked up about it. No matter what happens, America is not lost. It's not. Okay, I personally don't want a Kamala presidency. That's not my thing. I'll openly say I voted for Donald Trump, but I'm going to keep fighting no matter what happens. If Kamala is president, I'm going to keep fighting. If Trump is president, I'm going to keep fighting. I'm going to fight to bring the power home from Washington, D.C. to the states where it belongs, because it doesn't matter who's president. We're going to need to bring the power back home. And so I just want you to remember, on election day, stay calm, stay cool, don't freak out. It's going to be okay. Now, as we close out, there's some things that happened this week that were really incredible, where it seems like Democrats are doing what they can to help Republicans win the election. Amazingly, a few different events. Number one, not necessarily in this order, Mark Cuban decides that he's apparently going to insult every single woman in the country who is supporting Donald Trump. I'm not sure why he thinks this is helpful. I don't think the Democrats put him up to this. I think it's really dumb. And he says, have you ever noticed that there are no smart, strong women around Trump? You may not have seen this meme yet. You may have, out on X, on other social media, women posting that they are strong, smart women who are supporting Donald Trump. I watched Kayleigh McEnany, former press secretary, say how infuriated she was by this, mentioned by name many of the strong women surrounding Trump that were during her time with Trump and that are still surrounding Trump now. It's just a stupid, unforced error on the part of Mark Cuban. So you got to ask yourself, dumb, dishonest, maybe both. Whatever Mark Cuban does from here on out, don't listen. I mean, I don't think that gaffe helps Dems. I think it helps Republicans. So maybe if you like Republicans, you say thank you to Mark Cuban. Then you have Joe Biden make the comment that he believes that Donald Trump supporters are garbage. And I know the media tries to cover it up. It was an apostrophe S. It wasn't supporters. It was support apostrophe supporter apostrophe. Like, it was just stupid. It was a complete cover up. As usual, the cover up blows up worse than the crime. And so now the cover up is frankly making it worse. It's still going on. The media denying, Politico denying, Biden denying, et cetera, et cetera. But Biden, no doubt, created this meme. It's all over the internet. Donald Trump takes advantage of it by getting a giant white garbage truck with a Trump sign on the side, going for a ride in that garbage truck. I mean, that is just, these are epic trolling moments. This comes on the heels the week before of Trump's epic trolling moment at McDonald's, learning to make fries and serving at the drive-through window. I just don't even get it. When Biden calls Trump supporters garbage, does he know what he's doing? Is it dementia? Or maybe he just hates Kamala that much? I mean, she did push him off the back of a moving train. He did win the nomination, after all, legally, square and fair. And then they just removed him and made her the nominee without a single vote. She put the knife in the ribs, in his back, when he wasn't looking. Maybe he should have been looking, and pushed him off the back of the train as the semi-dead corpse that he is, and took his nomination away. So maybe he just hates her that much. I don't know. Maybe somebody should ask him. I'm not sure he even would remember or could answer. All right, let's go to our Q&A now. On our Q&A, let's see what we got here. Let's start with David Combs. Can defunding the numerous federal agencies stop the enforcement of rules, laws, and regulations they have imposed, or do these laws and rules have to be rescinded individually? No, defunding would do it. If there's no money for them to do that work, then there is no work for them to do. So I think defunding would do it. But better, David, to call a convention of states and to make those agencies unconstitutional. And that's what we intend to do. JB asks, could COS pool its Article 5 applications with other Article 5 resolutions? The answer is no. That's a concept known as aggregation. The question is, can we aggregate with other applications? The answer would be no. And the reason we can't is because it's about the intent of the state that filed the application. And states that filed applications that did not include our 3-part resolution for term limits and fiscal restraints and restraints on the scope, power, and jurisdiction of the government, then they didn't express that intent. They might have said they wanted a convention on the right to life. They might have said they wanted a convention on just the balanced budget amendment. It means they didn't want to talk about those other things. Those things, in my opinion, cannot be aggregated. Very smart question, though. I like that question. All right, before we close out today, a few things I want to mention. Number one, COS Live election night. That's 8:30 p.m. Eastern time on the night of the election. Go to conventionofstates.com/COS Live. I'll be joining that at some point, probably at multiple points. You're going to get live results on national races, and probably you won't get these anywhere else, state legislative races that are important to COS. These are going to be important for us going into the 2025 session, and we're going to cover all of that stuff for you. That's going to be hosted by my good friend and our national legislative director and lawyer extraordinaire, constitutional lawyer extraordinaire, Rita Peters. She'll be hosting. I'll be there with her. Then COS at Home, Wednesday at 8 p.m. Eastern time. I'm going to be there. Rita's going to be back again. Senator Rick Santorum is going to be with us, and we're going to recap the election results and also what the state legislative races mean for COS, because we want to then look forward past the election night. Don't forget to go to Article 5 Outfitters. We have your new America's Worth Fighting For hat. That's an limited edition mugs, all kinds of new stuff there. Go to Article V Outfitters, article5outfitters.com. Get your stuff now. The new mugs, there's some beautiful ceramic mugs there. Those are on pre-order right now. I can't wait to get mine. As soon as I get mine, I'll show them off to you. Also, don't forget to promote Save Their America. So hashtag Save Their America in social media. And do me a favor, make a video. In that video, talk about who you're fighting for. Whose America are you saving? And you can upload that at www.conventionofstates.com/upload. Last but not least, encourage you to submit your questions. We need more questions, lots more questions. Your questions are always brilliant. Submit those at conventionofstates.com/askmark. As we go into this week of election, I just want to encourage you, deep breath. Stay calm. It's going to be okay. God bless you guys, and I'll see you next week on the BattleCry.